You're listening to WQYX 612, Low Power Emergency Band, broadcasting out of Springfield, Missouri. Name's Mark Hadley, former field technician for the regional PBS station, Public Broadcasting Service, if you don't speak in acronyms. I spent 27 years dragging cables, replacing transmitters, and yelling at underpaid interns who couldn't tell a gain knob from a banana. I retired 4 years ago, divorced 2 years before that, and lately I've been talking mostly to radios and coaxial cables. I keep this setup going more out of habit than anything else. You could call it a hobby, but that feels too soft. It's more like a compulsion. I've got a garage full of gear, scavenged rack units, analog meters, mismatched antennas, and a shortwave setup patched together from parts that were obsolete before most kids today were born. There's something comforting about it, though. It doesn't crash. It doesn't update itself. It just listens. And if you tune it right, it talks back. Anyway, I started this broadcast a few months ago when the power grid flickered during that freak heat wave in May. The official story blamed it on overuse and equipment stress, but a few of us on the amateur bands picked up what sounded like rerouting commands from old Cold War relay stations. It got me thinking. Not every outage is accidental. Some things feel deliberate. And tonight, something's happening that doesn't smell right. About an hour and a half ago, around 2100 hours, I picked up a low-frequency signal bouncing off the upper ionosphere. That's not too strange by itself. Stray signals do that all the time. But this one didn't fade like a weather balloon or a maritime distress burst. It was sharp, timed, and repeated 5 times in the exact same format. 4 words each time, with a 5-second pause in between. Loss of signal, Kilo 317. No call sign, no modulation. Just that. Same frequency burst, identical tone envelope, then those exact 4 words in an automated voice. If you're unfamiliar, Kilo 317 is not just some made-up code. It's likely shorthand for a satellite designation, and loss of signal means exactly what it sounds like. Something went dark. Now, it could have been a malfunction. Satellites lose contact all the time. Cosmic radiation flips a bit, onboard software bugs out, solar panels fail. But when I jumped on the boards, Hamnet, Signal Snoop, even some of the old web forums still crawling along, I wasn't the only one hearing it. There were guys from Alaska, Australia, and even one relay operator from Poland who reported the exact same transmission, same timestamp, down to the 10th of a second. Let that sink in. Multiple receivers on different continents logged the same signal at the exact same moment. That's not atmospheric bounce. That's intentional. That's something global. And if it's global, it's coordinated. Now at this point, I'm thinking it's maybe some kind of orbital test or emergency signal from a ground station. Governments do that sometimes without telling anyone. But then I called an old friend, Jules Thompson, formerly of the United States Navy Electronic Warfare Division back in the 90s. These days, he does consulting work for a private satellite imaging company based in Colorado Springs. Normally, he picks up on the first ring, but this time he didn't answer. Instead, about 20 minutes later, I get a text from him. Just 7 words. Not a test. Multiple kills. Stay dark. That was it. No follow-up. No return call. I haven't heard from him since. I don't panic easy. I've been through tornado warnings, broadcast tower fires, even an accidental ammonia leak at a transmitter shack in Texas back in the early 2000s. But this feels different. This isn't nature misbehaving or a technician screwing up. This is a pattern. At 2200 hours, I ran a full band sweep on both high-frequency and very high-frequency ranges. Normally, I pick up at least 6 to 8 commercial or civilian satellite pings during that time. Weather telemetry, positioning signals, emergency beacons, all kinds of orbital chatter. But tonight, most of them were just gone. Silent. GPS satellites, global positioning system, were intermittent. Some were offline entirely. Galileo, the European constellation, showed degraded signal strength. Beidou, China's system, showed unexplained positional drift, and the Russian GLONASS network had a gap window that should not be there. It's like someone took a scalpel to the sky and started carving out the eyes. And if you don't understand how dependent we are on those eyes, you're not paying attention. If those satellites go down, you lose more than just driving directions. The aviation industry runs on satellite nav. Container ships, oil tankers, and global cargo routes all rely on it. Our electrical grid uses synchronized timing from space to balance load and prevent cascading failures. Your bank transactions? Those depend on encrypted satellite links for coordination. The emergency alert systems? They're tied into satellite relays. And that's just the civilian side. Military operations depend on orbital surveillance, missile tracking, encrypted communications, and global coordination, all of it riding on birds in the sky. You take out enough of them, and the whole game changes, permanently. Just after 22:30 hours, I intercepted an encrypted burst transmission from the Western Pacific. I triangulated it to somewhere near Guam. Couldn't decode the payload, but the structure matched what used to be a high-priority format used by Strategic Command. That means it was either a real-time event update or a command relay. My gut says it wasn't just a drill. Shortly after that, I caught something else. Faint signal, possibly from a high-altitude balloon or a suborbital vehicle. The tone was jagged, like a damage report beacon. It repeated a series of ID numbers and then cut out mid-transmission. That's usually a sign of either destruction or deliberate jamming. You want a timeline? Let me walk you through it. 2100 hours, first strange signal, loss of signal, Kilo 317. 2130 hours, multiple confirmations from operators across the globe. 2200 hours, satellite constellations begin dropping off the map. 2230 hours, high-priority military transmission from Pacific origin point. 2250 hours, civilian GPS service partially offline in Northern Hemisphere. 2300 hours, my local cell tower dropped to emergency power, and I lost connection to the National Weather Service relay entirely. At this point, I stepped outside. It's quiet here. Residential neighborhood, dead-end street, no streetlights past midnight. Normally, I can spot at least a couple of satellites drifting across the sky if I stay out long enough. But tonight, it was dark. The stars looked wrong, brighter than usual, as if nothing else was up there. I came back inside, flipped the manual breaker on the garage to switch to battery backup, and started logging everything on analog tape. I don't trust digital logs anymore, not when it's clear that this thing is global. You might be wondering, what's the point of this broadcast if the grid's going dark and the satellites are dead? Simple, because there are still radios, still receivers, still ears out there. If you're hearing me, this is Mark Hadley, Springfield, Missouri, broadcasting on WQIX 612. Independent, analog, hand-maintained, and just stubborn enough to keep going. I'll keep this up until my battery bank dies or the gas runs out for the generator. If you're local, I recommend you print out any maps you might need. Write down phone numbers. Talk to your neighbors. Fill your car tank before the pumps stop responding to network pings. Find a battery-powered radio and stash it in a drawer. And if you're not local, you should still do the same, because if this is what I think it is, it's not stopping here. I believe we're at the start of something that has no rewind button. I don't know who started it. I don't know what comes next, but I know this. Someone took out our satellites on purpose, and the last time countries started blinding each other's surveillance systems, it didn't end in peace talks. If you tuned in last night, you already know something went wrong upstairs. Orbital, wrong. I logged at least 9 satellite losses between 2100 and midnight. Possibly more, depending on how many governments are still pretending everything's fine. But tonight it's not just interference and sky silence. Something came down. I'm not talking about a single satellite crashing out of orbit. I'm talking about aircraft. Dozens of them. In the last 6 hours, there have been emergency landings, partial mid-air collisions, and even full aviation blackouts. I'll give you what I know, what I've confirmed, and what I've overheard. None of this is third-hand rumor. Everything I say here comes from real voices on real bands. Let me start with what I picked up around 0200 hours. A commercial air traffic control loop out of Kansas City suddenly went silent mid-broadcast. That's a rare thing. Usually, even when there's chaos, someone's always talking. rerouting, requesting vectors, acknowledging weather changes. This time, there was a clean, hard stop. Then, 5 minutes later, a panicked voice came through on a nearby emergency aviation band. I caught only part of it. What I believe was a first officer out of Dallas-Fort Worth, rerouted toward St. Louis. He was breathing heavily, talking so fast I could barely follow, but the message was clear. No GPS, no ground radar, cockpit system showing false altitude. They were using old paper charts and dead reckoning, pilot slang for flying by gut and compass, the way it was done in the 50s. It gets worse. At 0300 hours, a ham operator in Nebraska broke protocol and started broadcasting on civilian distress channels. He said a Boeing 737 was forced to make a belly landing on an abandoned stretch of highway outside Beatrice. The local sheriff's department hadn't even been alerted. No flares, no fire crews. They had to use truck headlights from passing farmers to find the wreck. I have since heard multiple confirmations of that landing, including a relay from a volunteer fire unit that responded. They said it was a miracle the plane didn't break up on impact. No fatalities, but 2 broken arms, 1 collapsed lung, and a whole lot of people crying on the side of the road, completely cut off from everything. Now, if you think that's isolated, listen to this. My scanner lit up around 0400 hours with a flurry of compressed aviation traffic. Mostly automated collision avoidance reports, but then, clear as day, a United Airlines flight near Chicago O'Hare screamed across the band with a mid-air collision warning. I don't know if they clipped another plane, if it was a drone or debris falling from orbit, but their transponder went offline within 2 minutes of that call. They never checked back in. No mayday, no squawk code, nothing. Just silence. What scares me isn't the idea of a single crash. It's the realization that we've lost the coordination that keeps thousands of aircraft in the air without bumping into each other every day. That system relies entirely on real-time satellite feeds, altitude locks, separation lanes, dynamic routing. With satellites dropping like flies and ground radar lagging because of power issues or missing data, that whole structure starts collapsing, fast. I've got printouts here from the Federal Aviation Administration's pilot alerts that were still available before the page timed out. Multiple regions are listed under temporary flight restriction, which is bureaucratic speak for do not fly unless you absolutely have to. Texas, Colorado, Illinois, most of the eastern seaboard. They're shutting down airspace, not because of terrorism or weather, but because nobody can see what's in the air. Let me say that again for anyone who's not following. We've lost visual coordination over the skies. This is not a software glitch. It's not a minor outage. This is systemic blindness. Around 0500 hours, I made contact with a trucker near Memphis who was relaying messages for a grounded private jet that had landed on a makeshift strip north of the city. The pilot apparently saw a massive fireball in the sky, said it looked like a satellite breaking up on re-entry. Pieces of it hit farmland south of Nashville. He didn't say if it caused a fire, but he was certain it wasn't a meteor. It moved too slowly and it came in at a controlled angle. That implies a forced deorbit. I've seen a few of those in my time, mostly from test footage and archived NASA videos. When a satellite burns in controlled re-entry, it drops its orbit in stages. There's a pattern to it. But when it's shot down, the descent is jagged, chaotic, and fast. That's what he described. We have to face the possibility that someone, maybe multiple nations, have deployed anti-satellite weapons. This is not fiction anymore. The Chinese demonstrated their capabilities back in 2007. The United States has interception missiles designed for low Earth orbit strikes. The Russians have been suspected of testing kinetic kill vehicles as recently as last year. This kind of warfare doesn't come with loud headlines or neat battlefield lines. It happens in orbit, invisible to most people until the lights go out. We're now living in the aftermath of a quiet orbital war, and the skies are bleeding from it. I know this all sounds impossible if you're still watching cable news or scrolling your phone. But I'm telling you, the big networks are lagging behind or lying outright. Their live feeds keep cutting to pre-recorded segments. News anchors are reading scripts with wrong timestamps. One outlet aired a traffic report showing clear skies over Dallas, but I've had 3 different listeners from that area tell me the airport shut down and planes were grounded with no departure estimates. Either they don't know what's going on or they're not allowed to say it. Right now, I'm running this station on a combination of solar-charged, deep-cycle batteries and a backup inverter I hooked up to my old sedan. It's not sustainable long-term, but it's enough to keep this frequency alive. I don't have access to high-speed internet anymore. Fiber cut out around 0100 hours, but the shortwave traffic hasn't stopped. That's the key. That's how you know the world's still turning. The real voices are still out there. From what I've gathered, emergency response teams are scrambling to reroute all domestic flights to secondary airports, not because those airports are safer, but because they're not tied into the failing automated control networks. Smaller strips, less digital oversight, more room for manual control. That's why you're seeing planes touch down on abandoned highways and old airfields. That's why city traffic is a nightmare in places that haven't seen a plane overhead in a decade. Everyone's trying to bring it down gently before the sky becomes a minefield. There's a deeper fear behind the chatter I've heard tonight. One nobody wants to say out loud. If we've truly lost satellite coordination, then missile defense systems are either blind or relying on unconfirmed ground-based inputs. That's dangerous. Mistakes get made. One false positive. One misread heat signature. That's all it takes. You think the Cold War ended peacefully, but the deterrence never went away. The world didn't disarm, it just got quieter. And now that silence has returned in a much darker form. I don't say this to frighten you. I say it because you need to understand what's breaking down. This is not about fear, it's about awareness. If you live near a major airport or military base, stay away from the perimeter. If you have family traveling, try alternate contact methods. Don't rely on cell towers. Don't assume commercial networks are accurate. I've seen this pattern before. The smaller failures always come first, then the accidents, then the overreactions. If we are truly in the middle of a global anti-satellite campaign, the next phase may not be so quiet. For now, I'll keep monitoring. I'm tracking new signals out of Eastern Europe, shortwave bursts that sound like they're using old Cold War encryption layers. I'm also hearing open-loop data from South Korea's defense grid. It's unstructured, possibly corrupted, but someone is still trying to push updates through. That tells me there are still people fighting to keep this thing from going completely dark. To those of you out there listening, if you've got information, relay it on the emergency coordination bands. Use old CB rigs if you have them. Use analog over digital. We need voices, not packet data. This is Mark Hadley, Springfield, Missouri, broadcasting from WQYX 612. Still here, still transmitting. And tonight the sky is empty, the planes are coming down, and the silence is growing. This is WQYX 612, broadcasting from Springfield, Missouri. Mark Hadley here, still alive, still transmitting. And tonight I have more than just reports. I've got first-hand accounts, broken data, and a deep gnawing certainty that we're moving past disruption and straight into collapse. If you're hearing this, you've probably already noticed the signs. Empty shelves at the corner store, diesel shortages at the pumps, maybe a delayed delivery that never came. What we're facing now isn't just about planes falling out of the sky. It's not just about satellites blinking out in orbit. It's about what happens when every interconnected piece of our economy, every truck route, every shipping lane, every warehouse scan suddenly becomes unreliable. Let me start with what came in around 0700 hours this morning. A long-haul driver based out of Tulsa patched into the emergency CB relay channel and gave a hell of a report. Said he was hauling medical supplies from a distribution center near Dallas, trying to get them to a hospital in Des Moines. Should have been a straight 12-hour run, with rest stops and routing handled by onboard telematics, but sometime during the night his GPS, global positioning system, went dead. The truck's digital logbook reset. Route guidance failed, and when he tried to check in at the designated fuel stop near Wichita, the station's pumps were locked. No card transactions were going through. Their network was down. The manager told them they'd already turned away 2 other rigs because the payment system couldn't verify fleet IDs. So he pressed on. Tried to use a paper map, but ended up on a detour that cost him almost 4 hours. By the time he reached the outskirts of Kansas City, he was out of fuel and had to wait for a roadside diesel refill that never arrived. When he finally got cell service again, spotty and slow, he learned the hospital in Des Moines had already run out of critical supplies. He said the last thing he heard from dispatch was this: "All routes are failing. We're losing track of the fleet." Now multiply that by a few thousand drivers, a few thousand supply lines. Imagine it's not just one hospital waiting on oxygen tanks or IV bags, but 10 or 50, or every facility in a 500-mile radius. Navigation isn't a luxury anymore. It's the nervous system of the modern economy. From semis to farm equipment to container cranes and ports, every move is tracked, optimized, and routed through satellite positioning. If that system starts to degrade, even by a few seconds per day, everything becomes chaos. And we're past degradation. We're in failure mode now. I ran another sweep between 0800 and 1000 hours. Most of the orbital signals from civilian positioning satellites were either missing or repeating corrupted telemetry. Some of them were sending conflicting data, like reporting their position over Greenland and then a minute later over the Indian Ocean. That's not a drift. That's a total signal spoof or an echo off orbital debris. Either way, it's useless. And it's not just the positioning systems. I've been logging communication pings from freight dispatch servers that are bouncing between nodes with 30 to 40 second lag. That might not sound like much, but in a high-volume logistics chain, that's enough to trigger cascading rescheduling errors. It's like a factory floor where every worker is 5 seconds off beat. Eventually, the whole line seizes up. Around 10:30 this morning, a listener from Peoria called in on the analog relay line, landline patched to ham gear, bless him, and told me that the local Walmart distribution center shut down incoming trucks. Their excuse? Routing verification systems offline. The warehouse couldn't confirm whether deliveries were scheduled or not. No barcodes, no manifests. Just dozens of drivers sitting in their cabs waiting for word. You want to understand what that means? It means produce goes bad on the loading docks. It means frozen foods thaw in unrefrigerated trailers. It means medications that require time delivery, like insulin, expire before they ever reach the pharmacy. And when people start noticing that the food doesn't show up, when their prescriptions run out, when baby formula isn't restocked, they don't wait calmly. They act. I already heard 2 looting reports from St. Louis and 1 from Little Rock. All 3 happened at supply depots, not stores. One of the groups was organized. They hit the warehouse, bypassed the front, and took the pallets straight off the floor. Security didn't intervene. Most had already walked off. See, people understand instinctively that things are falling apart. The media might still be running stories about temporary service disruption or regional outage, but anyone with eyes can tell this is wider than that. Let me give you another example. This one came from a relay out of Oregon, coastal side. A private shipping company running mid-sized vessels out of Port of Astoria reported that 3 of their ships failed to dock due to navigation confusion. One of them scraped the outer pilings and had to be towed back by tug. Their cargo manifest? Raw aluminum ingots, headed for aircraft manufacturing. High priority, national level priority. And those ships weren't lost because of bad weather. They had no satellite coordination, none. Normally, the automated docking systems handle most of the process, with human oversight. But when the systems dropped, the captains were forced to navigate by shoreline markers and rough dead reckoning. They were lucky they didn't hit the pier sideways. I've also got scattered reports from Florida and the Gulf Coast. Oil tankers unable to verify their anchor coordinates. Some are drifting offshore until contact can be made. That's millions of gallons of refined fuel floating in open water with no active routing. Now think about what that does to refinery output, to fuel distribution, to energy infrastructure. We're not talking weeks or months here. These systems are measured in hours. Hours before backup runs out. Hours before deliveries stop. Hours before everything grinds to a halt. The scary part is, the average person won't notice until it's too late. The phone still works, the lights are on, the internet might still load a video or two. But the back end, the hard structure behind the scenes, is crumbling. I've spent my life around signal paths, satellite footprints, timing locks. I know what it looks like when the margin of the error starts widening. We're already past that line. We are now in the realm of cascading failure. This afternoon, I pulled out my old laminated frequency logs from the 90s and scanned for emergency backups. These were pre-satellite systems, ground repeaters, long-wave coastal transmitters, even a few deep inland microwave bounce systems from the Cold War era. I heard maybe 5. Total. The rest are either silent or jamming with garbled distortion, probably from orbital debris clouding the sky. I know what some of you might be thinking. Can't we just launch replacements? Can't we reboot the system? The answer is no, not in any useful time frame. A replacement satellite takes months to build, test, integrate, and launch. And with multiple nations now suspected of shooting satellites out of orbit, who's going to risk putting a new bird in the sky just to have it shot down next week? This isn't a temporary outage. This is strategic denial, orbital attrition. A quiet war fought hundreds of miles above our heads, and it's already brought the global supply chain to its knees. So what do we do now? For one, you need to shift your mindset. Stop relying on things arriving on time. That phrase doesn't mean anything anymore. Nothing is on time. Everything is in flux. You're going to have to prepare for delays, shortages, and breakdowns at every level. If you've got local sources for food, farmers, growers, co-ops, make contact. Establish a barter system. If you've got a backyard, learn how to grow even basic crops. If you're near a stream or well, figure out how to purify water without power. You don't need to panic, but you do need to act. I'm going to keep broadcasting as long as this equipment holds up. If you're still connected, I'll be posting analog signal bursts at the top of every hour on the secondary band, tuned to 24.9 megahertz. No encryption, no digital handshakes. Just pure carrier signal and short message confirmation. If you're relaying from another region, announce yourself with state code and band signature. We are now 72 hours into what I can only describe as a deliberate orbital shutdown. An anti-satellite war with no official announcement, no warning, and no public explanation. If you've been listening, you already know what we've lost. Aircraft guidance, shipping lanes, the supply chain, civil navigation. Today I want to talk about something else, something people often take for granted until it fails entirely. Weather. Not the sky outside your window. I'm talking about real forecasting, high-altitude imaging, infrared storm tracking, Doppler radar stitching. All the invisible tools we've relied on for 50 years to know whether we're getting hail, tornadoes, droughts, or a Category 4 hurricane in 5 days. All of that comes from satellites, and most of those satellites are gone. I woke up this morning around 0600 hours to the sound of wind pounding the side of the garage. Thought it was just a summer storm front rolling in from the west. I flipped on the emergency weather band like I always do. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The feed was looping, not in a subtle way, just a straight loop of yesterday's forecast, repeating every 45 seconds. They didn't even try to re-record the message. It said, "This is the National Weather Service in Springfield, Missouri. As of 0400 hours Central Time, conditions are stable with light rainfall moving in from the southwest." But I was looking at the radar monitor on my end. What was left of it anyway? And I knew damn well the system wasn't showing anything at all. No sweep, no echo, no data. The last Doppler image cached in my computer was timestamped 16 hours earlier. Since then, nothing. That means the regional radar towers are down. Either their power systems failed or their uplinks were disabled. More likely, they can't sync with orbiting calibration sats, so the system doesn't know how to interpret the data, which makes it useless. I tried switching to the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration channel for satellite telemetry. Again, nothing current. I've got printouts from 3 days ago showing satellite positions over the Gulf, the Central Plains, and the Mid-Atlantic. All gone now. And I'm not the only one noticing. A ham operator based in Oklahoma City broke into the emergency relay net and reported that a severe thunderstorm swept through Norman without a single warning. No sirens, no alerts, no text notifications. Trees down, roof damage, and a couple of injured folks who were caught outside with no heads up. You can argue that people should be looking outside their windows, that maybe we've grown too dependent on warnings, but when you're trying to coordinate citywide response to a flash flood or a hailstorm, timing matters. 15 minutes of warning can mean the difference between closing a school on time or locking children inside during a tornado. And it's not just storms. I got a call patch today from a local farmer out near Ava. His name's Bill Crenshaw, knows his land like the back of his hand. Been running the same spread since the late 80s. He said he planted based on the long-range forecasts from last week. They told him mild temperatures, above average rainfall. So he seeded early. But now he's staring down a sudden dry front with 30-mile-an-hour winds, no rain in sight, and the NOAA agricultural forecasting models are silent. He asked me if I had any idea what was happening over the Rockies, since the wind patterns made no sense. I didn't have an answer. I used to be able to pull satellite overlays, thermal cloud drift, and jet stream analysis with half a dozen keyboard strokes. That data's gone now. No imaging, no orbital overlays, just pressure gauges and guesswork. You see, it's not just the sensors that are missing, it's the infrastructure that interprets it. The Earth observation satellites do more than just send back pictures. They feed atmospheric models. They calibrate radar returns. They synchronize with sea surface temperature arrays and help track slow-moving systems like tropical depressions or drought zones. When those systems go dark, it's like trying to steer a ship without a rudder. The sensors on the bow still show the waves, but no one knows which way they're headed. I intercepted a scrambled broadcast from a decommissioned weather station out of Atlanta. Sounded like an old employee running a pirate signal on backup gear. He said they'd already lost high-altitude balloon launches. No way to coordinate them. The payloads either drift off course or return nothing but static. His exact words were, "We're flying blind, and the storms are still coming." Now, if you're sitting somewhere safe listening to this broadcast, maybe you think it doesn't apply to you. Maybe you've got a roof over your head and nothing worse than a little rain. But I want you to think longer term. What happens when the Mississippi starts rising? What happens when a hurricane forms in the Gulf and we have no way to measure its strength? No updates on where it's headed? No real-time correction? You think evacuations happen smoothly without warning? You think power crews can mobilize without knowing which grid segment's about to take a lightning strike? The entire disaster response system is built on lead time, and lead time comes from orbital data. This afternoon, I took a trip out of the city limits. Brought the portable unit. Just wanted to see what people were doing. Stopped at 3 gas stations and a small grocery on the edge of town. No one had heard a weather update since yesterday. Most didn't care. They assumed it'd come back on soon. One guy said, "It's the internet. It goes out sometimes." He's wrong. This isn't a network hiccup. It's a permanent loss of orbital awareness. And once people realize it, we're going to see a shift. First in behavior, then in panic. Because without forecasts, fear comes back. You'll see it in farmers who stop planting. You'll see it in cities that can't plan for heat waves. You'll see it in power companies who can't balance demand against temperature surges. Already heard that St. Louis is seeing power fluctuations because of a surprise heat wave. The grid expected 75 degrees. It's 87 and climbing. The air conditioners kicked on in every apartment complex, and the substations weren't ready for it. This isn't theoretical. It's already begun. I know what some of you are asking. Can we restore the satellites, get new ones up, deploy weather balloons, or build new ground-based radar towers? The answer's complicated. Technically, yes. But practically? Not in time, not at this scale. Even if we could build and launch new weather satellites this month, which we can't, We'd have to wait weeks for orbital alignment, calibration, and integration into the network. And what network? The tracking stations are offline. The data centers are blind. The synchronization clocks are drifting. And who's going to do it? Half the people trained to run these systems were laid off or moved into the private sector. You can't just Google how to rebuild orbital meteorology infrastructure. We are in free fall with no parachute and no landing zone. All right, here's what you can do. Start paying attention to the sky yourself. Learn the clouds. Cirrus, cumulus, stratus. Watch the barometer. If you don't have one, make one. Even a basic pressure gauge can give you 12 to 24 hours of warning if you know what to look for. Plant like the old-timers did, by soil temperature and moon phase. Listen to the wind. Watch how the birds behave. If the animals get quiet, it means something's coming. And most importantly, talk to each other. If you see a storm forming, warn your neighbors. Build your own early warning network. We're going to have to recreate the systems we lost. One neighborhood, one voice, one pair of eyes at a time. Mark Hadley, still on the mic. We are now well into day 4 since the global satellite collapse began, though you wouldn't know it if you were just tuning into a standard FM broadcast or checking a news app. Most of those channels are stuck in pre-recorded loops. A few are still live, but they're parroting the same line. Temporary outages, solar interference, network routing problems. They're lying. Or worse, they're just repeating what they're told without looking up. But something new happened tonight. Something I wasn't expecting. I made contact. Around 0200 hours, just before I was about to shut down the secondary band and switch to battery conservation mode, I picked up a burst transmission on 24.105 megahertz. Very low power, narrow beam, weak modulation, but clean enough to decode with some manual filtering. It came in with a pulse key identifier that I recognized, an old International Beacon Project call sign that shouldn't have been active since 2016. After about a minute of carrier tone, it switched to compressed speech. No encryption, no noise padding. Just a woman's voice, English, but with a slight Nordic accent. She said, if anyone can receive, this is Station Echo November 3, operating on fallback schedule from Svalbard. I had to sit back for a moment when I heard that name, Svalbard. For those unfamiliar, Svalbard is a remote Norwegian archipelago north of mainland Europe. It's home to the Global Seed Vault, a few polar research bases, and more importantly for this story, one of the most advanced satellite ground stations on Earth. The Svalbard Satellite Station is normally used for tracking polar orbiting satellites. It was designed to survive harsh conditions, massive power fluctuations, and even partial isolation from the rest of the world. If that station is still online, even in limited capacity, it may be one of the last places left capable of receiving orbital telemetry. The woman's voice continued. She identified herself as Dr. Anja Royseth, lead systems controller for Svalbard's Fallback Operations Group. She sounded tired, not panicked, just methodical, like someone working through a checklist while the clock ran out. She said they'd been operating on partial power since the first wave of outages, using locally stored fuel reserves to keep minimal operations running. Most of their satellite comms had dropped, but a few low-orbit weather birds were still passing within telemetry range. Barely. She listed 4 confirmed satellite IDs, 3 of which I recognized from my own logs as NOAA assets, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. But the 4th satellite she mentioned, that one I hadn't seen before. It was listed as Lambda 447. With a pass vector over the Arctic Circle at 0134 hours Coordinated Universal Time. Dr. Royseth said this satellite had not responded to handshake requests, but was still emitting a faint telemetry pulse every 11 seconds. The signal wasn't aligned with any known international civilian satellite. Now, if you're hearing this and wondering why that matters, let me spell it out. Civilian satellites are cataloged. They're tracked, numbered, and publicly known. A satellite that's broadcasting but doesn't appear in any registry and does not respond to handshake attempts could be a military bird, or worse, a classified one that was never supposed to be acknowledged in the first place. This raises a terrifying possibility. Some of the satellites still up there, drifting, damaged, or operating autonomously, might not belong to any government that's willing to admit they exist. Dr. Royseth continued, stating that Station Echo November 3 had begun detecting atmospheric disturbances over the Greenland Sea. The weather data was incomplete, but what they could confirm was a sudden rise in high-altitude particulate density. She didn't say it outright, but it sounded like she was talking about debris, burning metal, plastics, ceramics, all of it falling back to Earth. If orbital debris from anti-satellite strikes is already re-entering atmosphere over the polar region, we may start seeing contamination events in areas that are completely unprepared for them. And without functioning satellite mapping systems, there's no way to predict where it will fall next. It's not just fireballs and re-entry trails. These fragments can carry hydrazine, lead solder, and exotic fuel residues. If they land in a populated area or a water source, it could poison the environment for years. Dr. Royseth said their sensors were also picking up irregular magnetic disturbances, small but growing. She believed they were related to the sheer volume of electromagnetic noise generated by the satellite destruction events. When you blow something up in orbit, it doesn't just break apart. It creates clouds of electrically charged debris. That junk can distort local magnetospheres and disrupt anything from compass readings to wildlife migration. After transmitting the telemetry, the doctor added something that stuck with me. She said, "We are alone up here. The world went quiet all at once. If anyone is listening, you are now part of the last map." The last map. That phrase hit harder than anything I've heard since this began. Because she's right. With the satellites gone, with the tracking systems crippled, we're back to drawing lines in the dirt and guessing what's beyond the next hill. We're going to have to rebuild our awareness from scratch, signal by signal, report by report, person by person. After her transmission ended, I attempted a return ping using a directional narrow beam. No reply. Could be that she was using a one-way burst schedule. Could be that power failed right after the transmission. But for a few minutes tonight, the North Pole spoke, and it told us the war is not over. It's only getting colder. I want to pause for a moment and clarify something. A few listeners have asked, why is this still happening? Why would anyone attack satellites on this scale? It doesn't make sense. There's no declaration, no confirmed culprit, just silence and failure. But I think that's the point. This isn't war in the traditional sense. It's leverage, control. If you knock out a country's ability to navigate, communicate, and predict the weather, you don't have to fire a single missile at the ground. You let the system collapse under its own weight. And that's what we're seeing now. I checked in with my old contacts from amateur astronomy boards, those who still have stable scopes and tracking software stored locally. One user in Nevada reported that the Iridium constellation, used for satellite phones, has dropped at least 12 units in the last 2 days. Another user in Montana watched what appeared to be an entire high-orbit platform go dark during a standard observation sweep. These aren't glitches, these are subtractions, deliberate ones. You want to know how bad it really is? One of my local listeners sent in a report of a police drone in Springfield failing midair and slamming into a building. Turns out, it lost satellite coordination and couldn't maintain its hover point, crashed into the second-story window of a dental office. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the city's grounding all their drones now. Multiply that by every town using drones for traffic, search and rescue, or firefighting. Now imagine trying to coordinate those operations during a blackout with no overhead visibility. What you're seeing, what you're feeling, is the unraveling of a civilization that thought it could never go blind. We're blind now, but we're not deaf. I heard her voice from the Arctic. That means someone out there is still holding the line, still keeping watch, still tracking what's left. I'll keep scanning for her signal. I'll keep logging what I can. And if anyone else is listening, any other stations, any operators, any isolated labs or emergency centers, reach out. We need each other now. This is WQIX 612, Springfield, Missouri. Mark Hadley on the air, still breathing, still wired in, still fighting to hold a line between silence and collapse. We're 5 days in now, 5 full rotations since the satellites went dark. By this point, even the skeptics are catching on. You can't fake a week of navigational blackouts, collapsed shipping routes, blind flights, and ghosted newsrooms. The facade is breaking. If you're lucky, your local stations are still on backup power, repeating yesterday's headlines like nothing happened. If you're unlucky, like some towns east of here, the FM towers are cold and the cell towers have dropped to flashing red beacons. But something new has started to emerge beneath the official silence, underneath the automated loop messages and dead websites. I've started hearing new voices, short transmissions, clipped phrases, encrypted, masked, but very real. The shadow networks are online. I'm not using that term for drama. That's what these operators call it themselves. Shadow, as in unlisted, unregistered, unofficial. Signals that don't ride on public fiber, don't go through telecom backbones, and don't rely on space. I first picked up one of these networks just after 0200 hours last night. It was a data burst tucked in the noise floor of a 27.160 megahertz signal. Almost missed it. It wasn't vocal, not a standard broadcast. Just a sudden spike in amplitude, followed by 10 seconds of tight bandwidth digital modulation. I recorded it, filtered it, and ran it through every decoder I still have working. The message was simple: Echo 2 confirmed, relay nodes active, limit exposure, track manually. At first, I assumed it was military. We've seen encrypted comms bouncing around since day one, but the header contained no military formatting, no timestamps in coordinated universal time, no language structure associated with standard NATO comms. The cadence was something else: rough, rebuilt, civilian, or ex-military using non-standard tech. I boosted my gain and swept up the band. 15 minutes later, another burst. Different content. This time it read, Node Lima 4 relocated to autonomous grid. Break relay chain after 90 minutes. I pulled out my old paper logs. Yes, I still keep physical notebooks for this reason. And started charting locations and probable hops. From signal bounce and delay timing, it looked like it originated somewhere in the southern Rockies, maybe northern New Mexico. The relay paths looked line of sight, possibly using mountain peak repeaters or mobile microwave dishes. This is what they're doing. These shadow networks. They're using terrain to their advantage. No satellites. No high-altitude relays. Just ground-to-ground hops using leftover Cold War equipment, weather balloon repeaters, modified ham towers, and in some cases, old cable TV microwave dishes. The infrastructure was already out there, buried, mothballed, sold for scrap. These people knew what was coming, or at least how to adapt. I don't know who they are. I've logged at least a dozen node IDs, all alphanumeric, all rotating on 15-minute schedules. They don't identify themselves by names or organizations, just tags like Kilo 9, Echo 4, Whiskey 02. But I'm hearing their transmissions more clearly every night, and I'm not the only one. I got a relay call earlier from a tech out of Baton Rouge. He built a simple Yagi antenna rig on his roof and pointed it west after he heard static patterns matching what I described. Within 4 hours, he received a data packet from Node Tango 1, containing a 5-line weather log and a list of confirmed cities with grid failure. That same list was repeated from a different source out of western Colorado, Node Sierra 6. They're building a new map. Quietly, silently, city by city, failure by failure. No fanfare, no press release. Just hard information, passed hand to hand, node to node. The shadow networks are the new backbone. And here's what I find fascinating. They're not all human-run, at least not in the traditional sense. Some of the transmission patterns show signs of automation. I've seen checksum redundancies, adaptive error correction, even time-synced modulation shifts that suggest pre-programmed uplink behavior. Which means some of these networks were designed to wake up only if the primary systems went down. They were waiting, watching, in silent mode. And now they're online. I intercepted a message from Node Hotel 8 out of somewhere near the Wyoming border. It read, Layer 3, confirm. Defense coordination channels inactive. Civilian fallback tree in effect. No override. Propagate sequence. There are phrases in there that aren't standard military language. Layer 3 could be code for a backup protocol. Civilian fallback tree sounds like a command hierarchy built outside official command. To me, it sounds like a parallel system, one built by people who knew that if the orbital infrastructure failed, they'd need an alternative. Not just to broadcast, but to govern, to coordinate, to survive. We're seeing the first fractures of what comes after the global grid. The federal emergency systems are silent. The satellite phones are dead. The air route traffic control centers are overloaded or offline. FEMA hasn't issued a live update in over 48 hours. But these nodes, these anonymous fragments of broken signal, they're building something in the dark. I don't know yet if they're benign, hostile, or just pragmatic, but they're fast, organized, quiet. And so far, they're the only ones delivering any kind of information that matches what I see with my own eyes. Earlier today, I got a handwritten note slid under the side door of my garage. No envelope, no return address. Just a printed frequency band and 3 lines. It said, stay on voice, do not probe uplink, node Lima 12 listening. I don't know who left it. I don't know how they knew where I was, but I took it seriously. This isn't surveillance in the old sense. It's signal awareness, waveform memory. They're tracking patterns. Maybe they've got better logs than I do. Maybe they've got ground-based radar arrays hidden in abandoned telecom bunkers. I've been in this game a long time. I've never seen a civilian signal infrastructure move this fast or stay this quiet. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll keep monitoring them. I won't engage directly. Not yet. But I'll listen. If you're listening to me, if you're still online, still transmitting, do the same. Don't flood the bands. Don't ping too aggressively. Just listen, log, record. We don't know yet what these networks want, but we do know what the official systems are giving us. Nothing. And sometimes when the lights go out, it's the shadow that moves first. This is WQYX 612, Mark Hadley. Still here, still scanning, still awake. Next update will include expanded relay from northern Missouri and a follow-up on Station Echo, November 3, in Svalbard, if she's still out there. Until then, stay low, stay off the grid when you can, and don't assume the quiet means safety. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'll say it plainly. You missed the early days. The satellites are gone. Not all, but enough that we're flying blind now. Navigation is broken. Global communication has fractured. Weather prediction is dead. And tonight something we've been dreading finally happened. They started falling. I mean physically. This wasn't just data going dark or telemetry fading into background static. This was metal falling from the upper atmosphere. Controlled re-entry is one thing. We've done that for decades with decommissioned satellites. You calculate the drop vector, wait for the right window, and burn the thing into the Pacific Ocean. What we saw today wasn't that. At 0930 hours this morning, I got a ping from one of the local emergency relay groups I monitor. Small group. Fire department volunteers, retired state troopers, a few ham radio operators like myself. They operate out of a repeater shack near Rolla. The message was urgent but not panicked. It said, object seen falling at high speed, trail visible, no sonic boom, southeast to northwest trajectory, passed over Highway 63. I checked the sky 10 minutes later and saw nothing. But at 0955, I got a report from a grain hauler outside Jefferson City. He said something slammed into a soybean field about 300 yards from the road. He described a low-pitched rumble, almost like a detuned jet engine, then a blinding streak across the sky. The object hit the ground but didn't explode. No fire, just a hard impact and a wide spray of earth. He was smart, didn't approach, didn't get curious. Just reversed his truck and called it in on the VHF emergency band. I spent the next hour listening. More came in. One from a weather spotter in southern Iowa. Another from a volunteer emergency medical team in Indiana. All similar. Objects falling. No control. No military intercepts. Just streaks in the sky and impact craters and farmland. By mid-afternoon, I'd logged 17 separate confirmed sightings from 6 states. The impact points stretch in a curve that looks a lot like the trajectory of decaying medium Earth orbit satellites, probably navigation or older surveillance units. Most of them were likely dead before this, disabled during the first kinetic strikes. But now gravity's catching up. The thing people don't realize is that orbital decay isn't neat. It's not slow motion. Once an object dips low enough and doesn't have the ability to adjust its course, either because its thrusters were destroyed or it's been depowered, it falls. Fast. Pieces break off from heat and pressure. The speed's extreme. Re-entry temperatures can exceed 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But not everything burns up. The fuel tanks, shielding panels, and high-density components often survive. These things don't hit the ground like meteorites. They slam in like steel fists, traveling at several miles per second. That means anything under the descent path is fair game. Crops, houses, vehicles, people. So far, no confirmed fatalities, but that won't last. I got a recording, audio only, from a man just north of Springfield. His wife runs a hobby farm. He said they were outside feeding goats when they saw a red-orange glow cross the sky, low and fast. No sound until after it passed, then a pulsing crackle, followed by a thump that shook the earth under their boots. They found the crater about 15 minutes later. Still warm. Metal fragments everywhere. He took photos and tried to upload them, but the cell network wouldn't cooperate. So he called me on the landline and held the phone near one of the shards. I could hear it, still hissing, still radiating heat. I asked if it had markings. He said yes. Blocky text. A serial number, no flag, no nation, just 3 letters. LFR. I recognized it. Lambda 4, Romeo. One of the orphan satellites mentioned by the Svalbard station during their last transmission. That bird was unresponsive, probably hit by a countermeasure and thrown into a decaying orbit. Now it's in Missouri dirt. This is the new phase of the conflict. It's no longer just strategic, it's physical. The sky is shedding its debris, and there is no shield. I spoke with a friend tonight, one of the last voices I trust. His name's Glenn Parsons, retired engineer, used to do risk analysis for satellite failure scenarios, contracted through a defense research lab in Huntsville, Alabama. He said this was inevitable. The minute multiple satellites were taken offline violently, whether by missile, drone, or proximity warhead, you're left with a debris cloud. Glenn called it the cascade, a term the aerospace industry fears more than war. The Kessler cascade is a theoretical scenario where orbital collisions generate enough debris to trigger more collisions, like a chain reaction. Eventually, you create so much junk in orbit that launching new satellites becomes impossible. Every launch just adds more to the soup. He said we might already be there. If even half of the low and medium orbit birds were taken out, and based on the blackout we're seeing, that's a fair assumption, then Earth's orbital band is now a minefield. And here's the real problem. It doesn't stop. This junk won't fall back in a day. It'll take years, decades even, for all of it to decay. And during that time, every single satellite still functioning is at risk. Which means the era of space-based infrastructure may be over, at least for our generation. I want to make sure this lands for people. We didn't just lose television and positioning and Google Earth. We lost the eyes of the world. We lost timing, synchronization for the global economy. We lost long-distance forecasting. We lost early detection of missile launches. We are flying in the dark, and now the dark is falling back to Earth. I've heard rumors, only whispers, about a crash in Argentina. Something big. Metal hull, scorch markings may be intact enough to trace, but no confirmation. Just a shortwave report from a man who sounded terrified. Another report from Japan. A fishing crew came across a field of debris burning just offshore. Their GPS had been useless for days. They'd been dead reckoning toward land when they saw the sky rip open above them. They made it back, but one of them was sick by the time they docked. Radiation poisoning, maybe. Or chemical exposure. No one knew what had been in the satellite that burned up over them. There are no labels on falling stars. We built a world where we didn't look up anymore. We trusted that the machines up there would work forever. But now they're dying, and they're coming back down, and there is no instruction manual for what comes next. If you hear something above you, like a low, dull roar, or you see a flash that doesn't match anything you've ever seen, get away from it. Don't approach. Don't investigate. And for God's sake, don't touch the wreckage. Some of those birds ran on exotic fuel. Some carried classified payloads. Some may have kinetic triggers that weren't fully disarmed. This is not science fiction. This is junk warfare. Debris as danger. Ruins falling from orbit like a punishment we forgot we deserved. I'll keep tracking the fall paths as best I can. The shadow networks are still active, and I've started seeing pattern recognition in their node updates. They're mapping descent arcs. Crude, but it's something. This is WQYX 612, Springfield, Missouri. Mark Hadley broadcasting again. Same wire, same mic, same steady hum of a gasoline inverter hooked into 2 marine batteries I salvaged from an abandoned boatyard. We're in the 6th day since the satellites started going dark, and I don't need to tell you what's changed. By now, the difference between yesterday and today is no longer subtle. It's screaming in every neighborhood, across every dead phone line, down every dark road. Today's update isn't about what fell, it's about what's no longer standing. We lost the power grid. Not completely, not all at once, but the slow, systemic collapse of the electrical grid is no longer a theory. It's now a sequence of facts playing out in real time across the continent. I've tracked the progression myself over the last 48 hours using manual band monitoring, amateur relay calls, and what little remains of the emergency utility coordination channel. Let me be clear, we didn't lose it because someone hit a switch. We lost it because timing broke. Modern power grids rely on something called synchronized phase matching. That's how generators, substations, and distribution nodes stay aligned across long distances. In North America, the grid frequency is 60 Hz. The entire system depends on that rhythm staying within a razor-thin margin. Too high, you overload the equipment. Too low, you start cascading brownouts. Satellite timing systems, specifically high-stability atomic clocks in orbit, are what keep that frequency synchronized. They allow grids in Maine and grids in Arizona to agree on the same timing signature to within milliseconds. Now imagine those satellite clocks suddenly vanish. That's what happened, and this is how we fall apart. Early yesterday morning, I intercepted a relay from the Midwest Energy Cooperative out of Columbia, Missouri. They reported phase drift errors in 4 major substations. The correction algorithms failed to sync with backup systems, and 2 substations triggered emergency shutdowns to avoid transformer damage. That would have been manageable if it were isolated, but it wasn't. 15 minutes later, a power station in Kansas triggered a cold trip. That's a shutdown under non-standard load. It sent a reverse surge into the adjoining grid, overloading 2 industrial districts. By mid-morning, 3 counties were offline. By the time I checked back in with the grid monitor frequencies at 0900 hours, the language had changed. What was once temporary fluctuation became load-shedding failure. Localized outage became islanded grid event. These aren't just technical phrases. They're the funeral rites of a collapsing system. I had my own proof by mid-afternoon. Springfield lost its outer grid ring at 15:20 hours. I saw it from my roof. The lights across the east ridge of town flickered, dimmed, then went completely black. Street lights, traffic signals, apartment complexes. Gone. 10 minutes later, I heard the first car accident. No brakes, no stoplight. Someone plowed into a crossing lane at 50 miles per hour. 2 more crashes followed before the hour was up. And then came the silence, not the quiet of peace, the silence of cities losing their hum. If you live in a town, you might not notice it right away. The fridge keeps humming. The TV runs on a backup circuit. Maybe your local substation has a buffer, or your street's on an emergency grid. But if you drive 20 miles in any direction, especially toward industrial zones or outlying communities, you'll see what I saw. Whole stretches of land without a single bulb burning. I took a drive just after dusk. Brought a handheld rig, extra fuel, and a shotgun, just in case. Went east on Route 60 for about 30 miles, past 2 gas stations that were closed, and blacked out. Saw a grocery store with windows smashed and carts abandoned in the lot. And then I came to the overpass at Seymour. Looking north from that ridge, you can normally see the lights of 3 different towns, little ones, mostly farming hubs, but still populated. At least 6,000 people between them. Last night, there wasn't a single visible light in that entire valley. That's what I mean when I say silence between cities. Not just quiet, not just absence of noise. I mean total loss of function. No traffic, no porch lights, no hum of HVAC units. Just wind and the fading buzz of a generator 2 ridges back. I stopped by a fire station on the way back, Station 23, volunteer crew. They were running on battery packs and 2 fuel tanks. No dispatch from the city, no word from the Regional Emergency Coordination Office. They said they were staying put, responding only to calls within 5 miles. I asked how long they could last. The captain said, until the fuel runs out or the batteries die, then we'll use flashlights. That was the most honest answer I've heard in days. I want to explain what happens when the grid really dies. It's not just lights and TV. Water pumps stop. Gas stations can't push fuel. Sewage treatment halts. Hospitals burn through backup generators. Banks can't verify transactions. ATMs freeze. Cold storage fails. Stoplights go dark. Everything that requires timing, data flow, and controlled voltage ceases to operate. And people don't take it well. I've logged 15 confirmed reports of looting in my region since this morning. One of them involved an organized group with radios and spotters. They hit a pharmacy, not for cash, for insulin. The human mind starts making trade-offs when the system fails. Food, medicine, fuel, that's the new currency. And without the grid, there's no rule of law strong enough to stop it. I know this is bleak. I know some of you are tuning in hoping for something more hopeful, something to hang on to. So here it is. You are not alone. There are still voices out there, still communities forming, still people holding the line. I made contact again tonight with one of the Shadow Network nodes, Lima 12, short burst, 5 seconds. Enough to confirm they've mapped 6 functioning microgrids in the lower Midwest, solar-powered, locally managed, disconnected from the national infrastructure. That's how the recovery begins. Not from above, from the ground up. One node at a time, one powered street at a time, one working well pump at a time. If you're hearing this, you need to act accordingly. Print out maps, write down addresses and phone numbers. Stockpile water and rotate it every 72 hours. Do not rely on anything digital that you cannot physically see, charge, or fix. And if the lights are still on where you are, bless that place. But do not assume it will stay that way. I've got one more story before I sign off. A family on the south side of Springfield, name withheld by request, heard this broadcast 2 nights ago. They didn't have much: a solar lantern, a backyard water barrel, some old hand tools. But they went door to door the next morning, offered help, made introductions, started building what they're now calling a resilience circle. As of tonight, they've got 17 people pooling resources. Shared fuel, shared skills. They're rebuilding a manual communication relay using an old CB tower and a retired school bus battery bank. And they're asking for nothing. Just advice, updates. A signal to let them know they're not the only ones doing this. You're not. This is WQYX612, Mark Hadley, still talking, still listening, still holding the mic steady. Next update will include new tracking of orbital decay debris, the latest grid failure paths from Lima 12, and a report from a station near the Canadian border about strange signal propagation from the northeast. We're nearing the end of the first full week since the collapse began. Satellites are gone, navigation is dead, the power grid is coming apart like rotted scaffolding, and more voices have gone quiet than I can count. But tonight, I'm not talking about a power outage. I'm talking about a lie. It came through just after 2100 hours yesterday. I was doing a routine band sweep, 19 megahertz to 24 megahertz, same as I've done every night this week. Then I hit it, clear as day, strong signal, low background noise, professional modulation. Sounded like a state-run emergency feed. The voice was male, neutral tone, but with that clean, trained cadence you only hear from broadcast veterans or synthetic speech synthesis. He said, "This is the National Emergency Communications Authority. Satellite systems have been restored. Please resume standard activity and report to your local municipal coordination center. Power restoration is in progress." I sat still for 10 full seconds, listening, repeating it in my head. Then it looped. Same message, exactly the same, word for word. No live timestamps, no region IDs, no contact frequency, no sign-off. Just the same thing on a loop every 90 seconds. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was real. That somehow, against all odds, someone had restored one of the satellite uplinks and was pushing out a blanket recovery bulletin. But something felt wrong. Too clean, too generic. And then I noticed the frequency. It was transmitting on 21.600 megahertz. That's not a standard emergency frequency. That's not where you'd send recovery notices to shortwave operators. That band's outside the normal coordination range used by FEMA, NOAA, or National Guard relay stations. So I ran a comparison. I pulled up a waveform from a legitimate federal emergency test I recorded back in 2020. The real signal had slight modulation drift, normal for the long-distance propagation. But this new one, perfect. Too perfect. Digital signature analysis showed no variance in carrier frequency. Not even minor atmospheric interference, which means the broadcast was local. Very local. And whoever sent it was trying to make it sound global. That's when I realized what this was. A false broadcast, a decoy transmission. I don't know who sent it. I don't know where from. But I know what it's trying to do. It's bait. I killed my inverter, pulled the antenna cable, and let the entire shack go dark for 15 minutes. Then I waited. And sure enough, the signal swept again. This time on a different band, 23.1 megahertz. Same voice, same message. Which means this thing is hopping frequencies, trying to catch someone or track responders. I passed the recording to 2 other operators in the region, people I trust. They confirmed it. One of them triangulated the origin to somewhere near Fort Leonard Wood, possibly a repurposed transmitter with a directional array. He said the waveform pattern showed signs of adaptive gain modulation. In plain English, it was listening, not just broadcasting. That changes everything. You see, up until now, everything we've dealt with, satellite failure, orbital debris, grid collapse, it's been structural, mechanical, predictable in a horrifying way. But this is human. Someone out there has the gear, the know-how, and the motive to impersonate a federal recovery transmission, and they're doing it for a reason. Possibility 1. Psychological manipulation. Convince people the crisis is over. Lure them out. Make them lower their guard. Possibility 2. Tracking survivors. See who responds, who relays, who echoes the message. Identify operators. Identify groups. Possibility 3. Laying a trap. Physically. If someone hears that broadcast, believes it's real, and travels to one of the suggested municipal coordination centers, they could be walking into something far worse than a dead building. I contacted one of my last remaining ties inside what used to be Missouri Emergency Management. He's not with them anymore, but he still knows the comm structure. Said the state's last confirmed EOC, Emergency Operations Center, was shut down 3 days ago when they lost power and uplink. Most personnel scattered. Some went home. Some joined up with local responders. He said if anyone is claiming they've got federal authority and satellite access, they're lying. Full stop. So now we face a new threat, not just collapse, but counterfeit recovery. False hope weaponized. It's going to get worse, because as more and more of us go dark, these false signals will be all that's left for people to cling to. If you don't know better, you'll want to believe them. That someone fixed it. That there's an order to all this. That help is coming. But help is not coming. At least not from above. All we have now is what we build from the dirt with our own hands and through honest signals between people who still value truth over control. So here's what I want you to do. If you hear a broadcast claiming full restoration, question it. If the voice doesn't give timestamps, live verification, or relay contact, it's likely false. If the frequency doesn't match standard emergency bands, log it, record it, but don't trust it. And if someone tells you to gather at a location without proof of stability, electricity, or verified personnel, don't go. I don't care how convincing they sound. Trust your gut, not the tone of a rehearsed voice. The shadow networks have already acknowledged the false broadcast. Node Kilo 9 issued a hard block on any uplink accepting messages from 21.600 MHz. Node Tango 4 confirmed that at least one other fake transmission was logged in upstate New York. So this is not a regional event, it's coordinated, at least in intent. We've entered the age of counterfeit civilization, where someone, somewhere, wants you to believe that the old world is still standing, so they can be the one to build the new one without interference. Don't let them. Stay local. Stay connected to real voices. Validate what you can see, hear, and touch, and build from there. I'll be back with more tomorrow. There's something strange happening in the upper bands again. Static bursts in a repeating pattern. Could be more false signals. Could be something else. This is WQYX 612, Springfield, Missouri. Mark Hadley reporting one last time. I'm running this broadcast off one battery, a quarter gallon of fuel, and an inverter that's been sparking every time I touch the panel. The copper bus bar cracked sometime around midnight. I patched it with a salvage jumper lead, but it won't last through the next power cycle. I think this is it for the station, at least for me. Today marks the 7th full day since the orbital collapse began. 7 days since the constellations of steel and solar panels above us began winking out like dying stars. 7 days since we lost navigation, global comms, weather modeling, timing synchronization, orbital defense, and the backbone of modern civilization. And now, here at the edge of silence, I want to leave you with something more than reports. No frequencies tonight, no node lists, no burst logs. Just the truth as I know it. We've lost more than satellites. We've lost the idea that the systems we built were untouchable. In the first few days, there was confusion. People thought it was a glitch, a solar storm, an update gone wrong. But those of us who listen for a living, those of us who work in kilohertz and phase delay and orbital telemetry, we knew. You don't lose a third of your space-based infrastructure in a week by accident. You don't watch birds fall from orbit and still believe the power's coming back tomorrow. This was an attack. An undeclared war carried out in silence, with no flags, no uniforms, and no attribution. And it was successful, because nobody was watching the sky until it was already too late. But even in failure, even in collapse, there's clarity. I want to tell you about something I saw this morning. Just after sunrise, out near the east end of town, There's a stretch of old warehouse lots, most of them gutted years ago when the logistics firms moved operations to the rail hubs. I was checking one of the repeaters I rigged to a solar panel there. Thought maybe I could get one last signal boost before my inverter gave out. While I was walking the perimeter, I saw two kids, probably no older than 10 or 11, dragging a metal cart behind them. They weren't stealing. They weren't looting. They had scavenged a battery bank, a hand crank lantern, and a bucket of what looked like dried beans and rice. Behind them, a woman, early 30s maybe, wearing a windbreaker and a backpack with frayed straps. They didn't look scared. They looked focused. I asked where they were going. She said, "To the old bus depot. We heard there's a working well pump there and someone has a signal scanner." She paused, then added, "They said you're still talking, so we're going to try and keep listening." I pointed her to a safe path and gave her what was left of my fuel tabs. She nodded, didn't cry, just said thanks, and moved on. That's what's left of civilization. Not government orders, not military convoys, just small groups of people moving from place to place, trying to build something with whatever hasn't broken yet. And they're doing it with purpose, quiet resilience. There's no FEMA camp waiting for them, no Red Cross truck around the corner, but there is water. There is heat if you know where to find it. There are radios, if you know how to listen. And sometimes that's enough. The shadow networks are still transmitting. I've logged 7 active nodes across the Midwest and at least 3 near the Appalachians. They're short bursts now, low power, rotating bands, hopping every few hours, but they're out there. They're building a new map, not of geography, of trust, of reliability, of who's still speaking the truth. One of the final messages I received tonight was from a node tag Kilo 7. They said, "Signal verified. Protocol cascade complete. Local resilience networks forming. Begin phase 2, distributed signal responsibility. Grid restoration not viable, build from ground." It wasn't dramatic, no calls to arms, no flags in the dirt. Just a signal saying, "We're on our own now, let's act like it." That's where we are, not in the aftermath, but in the beginning of something else. I won't be on the air much longer. The inverter's whine is rising. The voltmeter's needle is dipping, and when the power drops below 10.2 volts, the transmitter kicks off for good. But before that happens, I want to leave you with one final instruction. Don't stop listening, not to me, to each other. When someone nearby says they have tools, ask what kind. When someone says they can fix something, bring them wire and water. When someone says they have food, offer fuel. Start trading in trust. Start rebuilding the invisible circuits that held society together long before satellites ever did. And keep your radio on, even if there's just static. Even if you think no one else is transmitting, because someday someone will speak again, and if no one's listening, it'll vanish into nothing. This is WQYX 612, Mark Hadley, radio technician, civilian, listener, signing off. I've recorded every second of this week to tape, labeled the reels, sealed them in a dry box under the shack floor. If anyone finds this place, you'll know what happened, how it started, why we fell, and maybe how we stood up again. The war in space is over. We lost. But down here, we're still fighting, with signals, with skill, with stubborn breath in the dark. And sometimes that's enough. Stay safe, stay grounded, stay human,